welcome back, ladies, gentlemen, and scholars, to the Keiser plus AI podcast. I am your host, Robert Keiser, Vice Chancellor of the Graduate School and Head of AI Integration for the university. We have another distinguished guest with us, individual I like to call friend, Dr. Lisa Clark. Good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. I know that our subscribers and our followers will really be interested to hear what you have to say as you're at the forefront of artificial intelligence and higher education. So, Dr. Clark, maybe you could speak about your background professionally. How did you get involved with artificial intelligence and all the amazing work you do?
Absolutely. So I've been in higher education now for, gosh, well over 20 years. And I started off in higher ed as an administrator. I was a network administrator back in the day, a webmaster, all those kind of terms that people don't even use anymore. But then I fell into education as an instructor. So when I went back to graduate school, I got involved into the fun side of computers. I like to call it. I was a programmer way back. With that, I taught visual communication technology for about 12 years full time. I still teach that adjunct faculty now to this day. And it's an area I just love doing, solving communication problems visually. It was always super fun, and it brought me into a different side of computer technology. Fast forward to my stints, not only with my four-year institution, but community colleges and for-profit institutions as well, building content for online learning. I came into Blackboard as an employee. So I do work for the Blackboard Teaching and Learning LMS. And I am the Associate Vice President of Academic Transformation now for Blackboard. So that means I get to do a lot of research in this field and in this area, serving on the product team as well as client success for the company over the last almost 12 years now there. It was really interesting. So it was a natural phasing into all the things that we were doing as a company, being the first to actually put in AI technology into our learning management system. It was a very natural evolution of now what does that look like for teaching and learning. So that's kind of how I got really into this topic. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Clark. And she's another one of those baby geniuses. She mentioned her tenure in the industry. So she started at 5. So I find that incredible because I thought I was young when I started
Thank
in
you
this
for saying.
industry, but I
Thank
think
you
you
for
got me
saying.
beat. Oh, of course. No, I mean, it's just, it is what it is. It's true. So, with that being said, just wanted to ask you because you are a unique individual. You're trained technically, as I am not. And then you're also a pedagogical expert and an instructional design expert. So I wanted to ask you specifically about teaching and learning. Artificial intelligence is obviously making waves throughout higher education. My alma mater, George Washington University, is taking a more restrictive approach and seeming to blue book their way out of this phenomenon. We at Kaiser are trying to be more forward and trying to embrace the technology. But I know you speak a lot. I saw you speak at Sachs about a year ago on AI and pedagogy. Could you give us a synopsis of where do you think the industry is now, and where do you think we should be when it comes to teaching and learning?
Yeah, that's a great question. We just came out of our international conference, our national internet and international conference last week, and had many conversations dealing exactly with that. Kind of like, what would this look like if you had a headline that you could put out there in 5 years for your institution? What would that be? And why? And I think you mentioned GW, which is a near and dear to my heart because my daughter graduated from there too. And it is interesting how you see the landscape across the globe. I work with institutions all over the world. And I've had many conversations, not only with the institutions, but with college age students, right? Those traditional college age students. And some of them have told me they really don't want to rely on AI. So it becomes a really interesting conversation for us, not only as administrators, but also as teaching and learning experts and instructors as to how do we balance that, right? Because they have concerns, right? That AI could erode their ability to think for themselves and that they have to pay broader attention to issues like sustainability and the environmental impact. And whether or not everybody shares those same kind of viewpoints, I think it's really important for us as educators to recognize those, to know that these are, concerns and ideas that students today are, not this monolithic group of students that that really do have some concerns there. And because of that, I think that's why our AI policies come into play, right? And what that looks like, because I don't think it's our job necessarily to tell our students that, this is what you do with AI, but it's really to help them think critically about using AI and what does that look like when they get out into the workforce as well, right? And so you mentioned the SACS conversation when we were there together. And about a year ago, I put together a reframing of Bloom's taxonomy that dealt with how do we look at learning objectives when we know AI is at play, right? When we're thinking about things like, building out different kinds of assessments. What does that look like for any kind of like authentication when it comes to who's actually delivering the content back to, for submission? If is it coming from AI? And if it does, then clearly learning's not happening, right? So it's about the thought process of how they came to that realization with AI. How did they co-create with AI? That's a whole different conversation to have when it comes to assessment, right? It'd be like collaborating in a way with a partner or a lab partner or a group. So it's a whole different way of thinking about this. It brings a whole other element into teaching and learning, which I find fascinating. And I think you do too, probably. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's a long answer, but yeah.
no, it was an excellent answer. It shows your expertise go macro to micro, talking about the environmental factors. Yes, environment more so socially, what's going on with data centers and concerns associated with that, and then really bring it to the micro level, what is true ownership of academic work in academia when AI is, say, a thought partner or consultant, and I think that is one of the best use cases, and I know
Right.
we tend to agree on that, but we also agree that critical thinking and true learning still needs to be there at the end of the
Absolutely.
day. So I wanted to ask you, because you touched on some of these. I agree, and I think this is a tough thing for institutional administration. I agree, application to industry of AI is so important, but then also every teacher is going to have a different thought process. One of the things that I noticed with AI integration is the human aspect is probably the most complicated aspect of AI integration. So, how do you see the context of academic freedom, and then also an administration who wants to push AI forward or does it? Let's just say faculty and administration are at odds. Have you seen
Mhm.
a struggle there? Do you have recommendations or thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, of course, there's a struggle for sure, right? Anytime we have any kind of technology, whether it's perceived as a benefit or invasive, there's always this struggle, right? So I would say don't begin with AI. Don't begin the conversation with AI. I think they need to begin with your graduates, with what that looks like for our graduates when they get out into the workforce. So decide what capabilities we want them to leave with, and then build learning experiences that can help develop those kinds of capabilities. Transforming education and transforming the ways that we're assessing our students isn't really about adopting AI. It's really about redesigning learning around the capabilities that students are going to need. And I say that because, if you look at AI as just a tool, right? Like any other tool that has come and gone, I have a quote from our incoming CEO for Blackboard, actually, in one of the papers that he wrote, Dr. Matthew Patinsky. And the reason I bring this up is because I'm going to always steal this quote from him, borrow, I should say, this quote. He has said that he was young enough to see how the internet impacted education, as am I. I'm sorry, old enough, old enough to see how the internet impacted education, but young enough now to see how AI is going to do the same thing. And I talk about that a lot because the internet changed everything that we were doing as far as education was going forward. Online education started to happen, the LMS emerged, the ability to do real distance education and bring education to areas of the world that we couldn't get to before. And I know
Right.
Kaiser's been fantastic at that, right? So that opened up a huge door. That made a whole different, opened up a Pandora's box of things and opportunities. AI is going to do, I think, that same thing, and it already has at a much faster rate because our technologies have advanced so drastically and quickly over the last year. So I think it's about evolving from a place where, online education, where an LMS, where all of that is more about more than just storing content. It's more about that. It's actually a learning, feedback, evidence, in a connection area. It's a place that we can actually transform learning in different ways that we've never seen before. And while AI is accelerating that and shifting from delivering information, I think it's also going to be more about developing human judgment that, and I don't think people think about that a lot. It's that human entity, like you mentioned. So I think it's going to accelerate that. I think it's going to amplify that. So I think it's going to be interesting.
I love that answer. I'm certainly, well, I try to be positive generally, but I'm certainly of the belief it
I do.
augments human intelligence. And your answer gets me so excited. Teaser for the audience, for Dr. Clark to be our convocation speaker, but that's neither here nor there. I love the thought of this is a technological disruption, like we've seen in the past, but yes, has a whole unique face to it that could really multiply. And I love that. And it shows the leadership that you and your CEO and Blackboard is in this industry and having that forward thought process of seeing where it's going to take us and what it could be. But I also love the beginning of the answer too, which is don't focus on AI when doing the change management aspect. I would agree. What I've seen is when I do that, it's not as effective when I try to show use cases of how the technology can benefit someone in their daily life and doing the tasks that they typically do and reduce that bandwidth concern, so to say. Then they say, okay, well, now this makes sense. This is what, I want to use the technology for. So I think that makes perfect sense. And it leads me to my next question. And I really thought that was a really articulate thought, so thank you. Let's talk about
Sure.
online learning, right? So online learning is always where everyone thinks that all the innovative ideas in academia go. I know Blackboard has led that charge for many, many, many years. So where is Blackboard? Where is AI going in online learning? What is the hope? I know it's going to take time. We as clients aren't always the most patient. I'll speak for Dr. Olson and I. But I know you guys are working tirelessly every day, every night, and bringing this feedback in. So where do you see us going with AI and online learning?
Technology itself, as we've seen, especially lately, moves very quickly. Human judgment develops over time. And I do think we're going to come back to an area when it comes to online education, when it comes to how we're going to move forward with education to the more of an evidence-based over time learning process, where, in my opinion, I think we have this kind of arc. I call it a transformative education arc, right? Or the T. And I think that arc is something that you have intermittent pieces and points of time where humans have to interact. You have to look at how learning is developing over time. When we have the ability now to have everything done for us and with a click of a button, anybody can use AI, right? If you can ask a question, you can use AI. If you have the internet, right? If you have a phone in your hand, you literally just have to ask it a question. And that question, though, becomes really interesting because that's where the critical thinking can happen. It's not just about that first question. Nobody asks ChatGPT or, choose your weapon of choice there. But nobody just asks it one question and gets the perfect answer, right? It's about digging further and asking more questions. It's a lot like a discussion board online when it's done correctly, right? It's engagement. It's just engagement with an AI entity, if you will. So it's the idea of digging in, asking questions. It's not unlike people have done by Googling it over the last few years, right? You're looking for information, you're looking for answers, you're looking for responses. The critical thinking part of that happens when you continually dig deeper and you ask questions a different way. You reframe how you're going to get that information, and that's part of the learning process these days. So I think all of that's really interesting. So it's going to be, I think, a way of how do we combine that together? How do we showcase evidence of learning? How do we look at how that happens across time when it comes to our assessments? And how we can judge and value what learning has actually taken place. So does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And I think your screen even liked it too with the
I
thumbs
know it
up.
gave me a thumbs up.
That
That
was
was
pretty
pretty cool.
cool. Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Actually, to your point, one of the things we're excited about it in collaboration with Blackboard and everything that you're leading is the concept of learning never stops, right? When you're in the online learning environment, historically, as you mentioned, you'll interact with discussion posts, but at a certain point, you kind of come away from your course room. You may not be reading, but with AI, you can constantly have that discussion post experience, constantly iterating, asking questions, going back and forth. Again, I always call it like a pocket consultant if you use it correctly. And I think AI is best used as Socratic, asking questions of AI. And then additionally, what you mentioned is the analytical aspect too. If my colleague, Vice Chancellor Reed Paul, was here, we would be talking almost endlessly about how we can drill down to the most, basic rudimentary level of data, and then extrapolate from there with great, credibility and validity of how can we support learners, how can learners support themselves, where are the learning gaps, what is the content they need to improve on so they can remediate and get the outcome that they want. And I think that AI provides that solution, especially in an online learning environment where we're constantly collecting those artifacts and that data. You don't have that data leak as much. I wonder about that, and what that
Mhm.
means for on ground,
Sure.
a little bit, because I don't know how you feel about this, but I remember when we started in the 90s, early 90s with online, we were heretical. And as you know, us, like we're not, our minority of our population's online, but a good portion. But now it's if you're not online, you're not in the game. You're antiquated. And I think in some ways the modern classroom benefits significantly because of technology that is provided online. I don't know if you have a thought on that.
Yeah, I do. Of course, I have thoughts on everything, as you know, Dr. Kaiser.
Yeah, it's
But
true. That's why I love it though. You're like the perfect guest.
um, I don't think, how do I phrase this the correct way? I don't think this is all about um, competing with technology, with the in-person classroom or the on-ground classroom. Um, I think the more interesting conversation is the way we're still assessing our students between on ground and online, right? Because
Interesting. Okay.
we are we're looking at assessing students the same way we've been assessing them for the last how many decades, right? The Socratic way of learning, as you mentioned it, and the Socratic way of questioning ChatGPT is very effective. But when it comes to a lecture-based format, I had a class once where it was, going to lecture every week. I had a midterm and a final, and those were the two grades I had for my entire course.
Yeah.
So I that's not representative of how people are going to be learning now or in the future, in my opinion, because it is going to take a whole different way of looking at that. So it's not about competing against technology. It's not about competing against AI versus on ground. I think it's more about developing again those really distinctly human capabilities and bringing those out because AI can't replace that, right? So, we can talk about sentience. We can talk about, what was it, HAL 3000 or what was it from? Why am I getting so many cool things in my
I don't
background?
know, but it's very cool.
Thank you,
I don't know
team.
what
I think
about
it's
how triggered the fireworks in the
I
background.
talk with my hands and I shouldn't,
Yeah,
but we'll
so
see.
sentience, is my sentience, but then I get nervous. I call it Skynet, from Terminator. But yes, HAL 3000 works too.
I didn't know if I had the number right. I think it's HAL 3000, but
Yeah, I think
HAL
that's right.
scared
That
me,
sounds
and
good to
not
me.
gonna lie to you. So, yeah, when we think about it that way, so I think it's about again bringing in the human element and making sure that the instructors are still at the very front of the education process. I know that's something as I speak with institutions, again, all over the place. It is something that they are afraid of, right? They're worried that the instructor is going to be taken out of the equation, and I'm like, if anything, you're going to be amplified as part of this because we still need that human element. We need to engage in students to make sure that that learning is happening. If I am a student, back in the day, I was a terrible student when it came to writing outlines. I wanted to write my whole paper first and then do my outline because I could never think
You
of
and
the
me
whole
both.
thing.
I,
I
I'm
don't
I'm
know.
too impatient though. I
I
mean that
maybe that was it. Maybe
no, I
that was
think
it.
you're probably too intelligent. You already knew what your paper was. I was just like, I got to get this done. That's a whole different story.
I don't know about that, but it was horrible. And there were many times when, forgive me to my high school English teachers, but I wrote my paper first and then I did the outline afterwards, which is completely counterproductive, but that's what I did because that's how my brain worked. In this day and age, you can get that outline done in 5.2 seconds and have it ready to go. If I would have taken that stress out of my day to day when it came to my high school English composition classes. How cool would that have been? I would have had so much more time in my day and be able to actually concentrate on my writing because it was already done for me. It was still my thoughts, still my, my conversation. It's still what I want to put on paper. But, AI is just kind of helping me think through that process. So for me on a daily basis, it's like my coworker sitting next to me in a cubicle that I don't have. You can see I'm in my home office, right? So, I don't have that ability, unfortunately, working remotely to always get to a colleague because we're all in meetings all day long and, we're on phone calls and that kind of stuff. And sometimes it becomes like, here's what I'm thinking, here's my reasons for it. These are my theories, put holes in it for me, and it will, right? So it'll poke holes in my theory. It'll, give me give different ways to look at different objectives and those kinds of things. So for me it becomes like a coworker in a way, and I'm sure for you it's probably about the same if I know you well enough.
Oh, absolutely. It's a much more organized, methodical Robert, frankly, because that's
Yeah.
not me. So I use it as counsel. And one of the things I completely agree with you. You mentioned the outline, which I was terrible at.
I'm
But
so glad there's somebody else like that.
oh, it's so funny because if we had Sherry on this, she'd like have immaculate outlines.
Oh, I'm
She'd write the
sure.
paper in 10
I'm sure.
days, but like, the outline would be immaculate.
I don't
Um,
I don't doubt that for a second.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's just the way, people are and like how organization versus I guess expedience. That's what I like to think. But anyways, um, sometimes I think with the AI conversation, I'm curious to know what you think about this. Alex Carver for Palantir mentioned those who are going to do well in the AI era are going to be neurodivergent. I
Hmm.
like to say that is they have imagination, creativity. So
Hmm.
when we go to the outline conversation, I think sometimes what I notice there's a phobia amongst administrators or professors. Let's take the case the professor here, that well, if they don't do it in the classical manner, we're
Hmm.
not going to get the outcome we want. But what if we went 2.0? Now that we can do an outline in 5.6 seconds, like you said, what else could we do? Could we do more in that classroom space? Because, we talk about a news hole where you can't get so much news in, or classroom, you're confined by your credit hours or your contact hours. Now, that contact hour, you can do so much more. But I think it calls for bigger outside the box thinking. And
Absolutely.
maybe that outline, okay, well, that's not where we're hanging our hat, but maybe we can do even more than a paper, and
Hmm.
make a true vibe coded project with a thesis.
You
I don't know
just
what your thought is on that.
you just you just capped off my entire paper on reframing Bloom's taxonomy, so it's amazing. So yeah, the tradition of Bloom's, right, is that pyramid, and at the top of that pyramid was the latest version was create. I suggest that it's co-create, and I talked about that already about co-creating with AI. But then I suggested a next level that isn't in traditional Bloom's, and that's transform, and that's exactly what you just really defined. So it is, higher education in and of itself has always kind of ended with that kind of create apex, if you will, the ability to create something, turn it in, have an assessment, have it be, viewed against a rubric or whatever it might happen to be, as far as how to assess learning. We're different now because we do have a little bit more time on our hands if we have that shared responsibility of collecting and gathering evidence and information with AI. It opens doors to things we don't look at. I always still talk about the idea of, we still teach in silos, don't we? You have a discipline, I had a
For sure.
discipline, and when we're in the classroom, we're teaching to our discipline. AI doesn't have a discipline. AI teaches us across all
Oh, that is
disciplines,
a great point. Never
right?
thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is giving us back information, perspective, all that kind of stuff from all over. It's not just silo specific by discipline. And I'm not saying there's not a case for, having that kind of expertise. Of course there is. But it's giving us, I think, a more holistic view of gathering evidence and gathering information for us to then transform what we're learning into something higher, than we've ever seen before.
And I love that thought of not being confined by discipline. And just in general too, I think one of the limitations of higher ed or education in general, or at least the critiques of, is that once you have a deliverable, an outcome, what stops there? It doesn't always apply to industry. It
Yeah.
doesn't always go cross discipline. And I mean, few things in life. I just think of relationships. It's kind of a joke, but it's kind of true. If you're in a significant, serious relationship, you're going to dive into psychology. You're going to dive into education. You're going
Yeah.
to dive into communication. So
Yeah.
humans are nuanced and complicated, right? So anything that deals with humans, you're not going to stick so neatly into a box or into, an academic discipline. But
Right.
then conceptually, right, you can then also go beyond and say, now we have this more time. Now we have the capability to do these things with technology. Maybe we go that next level. And I think that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I had students who had a final project for my synthesis classes always, and it was this wonderful project that was really a great answer and a solution to a problem that an actual client, somebody in the community, had. They would come to our classes and they would present, and we would be able to give back our idea for a solution or my students' ideas for a solution. But when they submitted that project then to me as their assessment, it stopped there. And I think now with AI, that opportunity part of this is that it can help build, it can help co-create. And then I think we can amplify those kinds of projects a little higher and maybe even transform how the institution is looking at policy, how that client perhaps is going to address this problem that they are trying to solve. So I think it does help us transform not only our ways of thinking, but also the tangible pieces that come out of our projects and what we're teaching and that learning process altogether. So that's all very exciting to me.
Well, and that makes perfect sense. I can tell you AI has been instrumental to me in supporting my thought process on policy, especially process. As mentioned earlier in the podcast, I'm not a most meticulous person. Process flow is not something you want to give to me. But AI is pretty good at it. And it speaks
Yeah.
to going back to its knowledge across disciplines, across different tasks and skill sets. And obviously it blends itself well to a synthesis project. You
Mhm.
touched on the past. Lisa, I have to ask you about the future.
Sure.
And then we'll do two serious questions, and then I have fun questions. I like the
Okay.
audience to get to know the speaker a little bit. It won't be too crazy.
No, I
All
like
right,
fun
so
questions. It's all right.
okay, good, good, good. So we'll have fun with that. So the first serious question is, okay, you are at the bleeding edge of this. You've been an educator for a while. You're technologically savvy. You are using AI in many, many ways and lecturing and educating on it. Where are we in, let's say, I know this is really hard with AI, but let's say 10 years.
Wow. 10 years is a long way away. Um, Gosh, I can't even begin to guess. Um, but if I were to, I suppose, I think it's limitless, honestly. I do think, with every good technology, there is a lull that also happens. So I think if we look across the building of technology and how it kind of like drops off, because I think it becomes less exciting sometimes once people are getting used to it. So I think we're probably coming up to that kind of part with AI. I don't know if you've had fewer conversations or more conversations that are specific to AI. For me, it's been less about AI and more about just changing up teaching and learning. So I do think we're going to look at different ways of approaching teaching and learning by ways of how we are assessing our students. And I hate to beat a dead horse because I keep talking about that, but I do think it's right. Because we're looking at an age where maybe there is even more and more robust higher education online. I think that's a great thing because, again, it's reaching people that maybe normally can't get to a campus. So I think it's great to bring education to them. That's a wonderful thing. That's a great opportunity. I do think it's going to be evidence of learning. I do think it's going to be amplifying human judgment. And I think we're going to be coming up to a time when maybe we all need to come back to just talking and not using technology as
Yeah.
much. Those students I talked about before, the ones that had those same kind of concerns about the environment and about how AI is impacting their learning and their thinking overall. I had another thought about this the other day. They're also the COVID kids, right?
Yeah.
So my own kids included, my two oldest especially, They came out of COVID. They were in college and high school during those COVID years. So they missed out on such a lot of opportunity there. And I think part of that is craving human interaction and craving the ability to just be human. And I think that's important. But I think if we approach it, in that way, it's going to become very clear to us how AI is going to play a role in the future. And even though there's, a lot of fear about AI taking away jobs, I also think it's going to increase jobs by way of blue collar workers coming back into the workforce. Um, you know, if we look at data centers, if we look at those kinds of things, we need electricians, we need people who are experts in the environment. I think it's going to amplify other areas of the workforce that maybe we're not thinking about right this very second because they haven't been thought about as much lately. But I do think they're going to be amplified. So I think that's going to be really, really interesting how that plays out. And then I just think institutional strategy, what's that going to look like for higher ed, right? What's that going to look like for universities? You hear all the doomsdayers who are like, oh, universities are all going to close down. I don't think that's true. We need that structure, right? We crave
Yeah.
structure as humans. So I don't think that's going to happen. But will it shift in how we are teaching? Sure. Should it? Yes, absolutely. We can't necessarily, there's tried and true methods of teaching and learning, right? And it goes all the way back to Socrates, like we mentioned before. That
Mhm.
is, centuries of time where that has been a constant, and that absolutely should stay in some ways, but maybe it has to be elevated in a different way. Maybe we do use some kind of interaction with AI to promote teaching and learning. Maybe we do look at it as a tutor, or ways that you can synthesize information differently, but always with human judgment at the core of it. So I don't know if that really answers the 10-year plan, but that's kind of some of the areas that
I,
I'm looking
I would
forward
say
to.
it's as good as anyone can do. Like 10 years in AI is like an eternity. I might as well have asked you what's the next 1,000 years look like in existence. So no, I look, I think that was a great answer. I think if you answered anything too specifically, um, it'd be impossible to age well, frankly.
Agreed.
Um,
Agreed.
but I agree with you. I think that, you mentioned the COVID babies and or they weren't babies, but kids
Right.
wanting social interaction. I saw this piece on the news said that malls are being flooded with Gen Alphas. And Gen
Yeah.
Alpha has spent more money on malls than any previous generation. And that blew me away. But it was
Yeah.
exactly what you said, is that they realized what they lost when they
Yeah.
lost social interaction during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I think there is going to be a counterculture. I think there's going to be a desire for to be uniquely human what in this AI era. I also do agree. I was asked, we had doctoral residency last week,
I saw that.
and yeah, and unfortunately, that's why I couldn't join you guys at Blackboard World. But I was asked, what is the thought on, doctorates and education age of AI? And I think one of the things is, I was mentioning, we have the midterms coming up, and I'm terrified to watch all the videos on my social media feed because I will not know what's real. Um, and I told the
True.
student, I said, well, with AI and its ability to produce content, I think there's going to be a strong visceral reaction to want credibility, to
Mhm.
want authenticity. And those who go through, I said it's not a blue check mark, but like a societal blue check mark,
Right.
um, are going to be important. So you're going to want to know that like that person with the alphabet soup, like that will mean even more, I think, in the
Yeah.
future
Yeah.
that the credentials behind the name, so to say. The last thought, and I agree with you, not to just be completely agreeable, but education and institutions are really important, if for nothing else, the structure. Uh,
Absolutely.
we
Hmm.
have had Coursera and MOOCs for 15, 20 years now,
Yep.
and they're great. And this is no hate on our, higher ed brethren, but they fill a different purpose. And what you end up seeing, over time is those
Hmm.
who went to MOOCs were already graduate educated individuals.
Sure.
They were looking for continuous improvement. It
Absolutely.
wasn't the associate or bachelor goer, and there's a variety of reasons. But the other thing is, I don't know if for me, going through school wasn't necessarily the most fun time. The social aspect might have been, but sitting down and doing math, I mean, I wouldn't want to do that. I do with my 7-year-old right now. I hate it,
No.
like, yeah. So I think, having someone who's, supportive that you can ask questions to that provides a structured environment is really important.
I
Uh,
agree.
last serious question, and then all fun from now on.
Okay. Okay.
If there was a myth or a mythology associated with artificial intelligence in education that you'd want to dispel, what would it be?
That it'll take over teaching and learning. I
Humans
mean,
or teaching and learning? Just teachers
both,
specifically? Okay,
both.
just making
Uh,
jokes. Yeah,
yeah, both. I can't envision a world where I'm learning straight up from a computer full time. I just think that's not not real life for any of us. We mentioned structure, we mentioned the idea of needing social interaction. I think that's going to increase the more technologies are introduced. It's almost impossible, like we've said, to really anticipate where this is headed, right? It could be a tidal wave, a continued tidal wave, a tsunami of technology heading at us before it starts to kind of calm itself a little bit. Or this could be the beginning of the calm, right? And kind of the absorption of what it is that we know now and how we can apply it. But I never see, and I could die on this hill probably, but I don't really just see a time where it's going to completely take over and not have humans that in the front of a classroom. And I think it would be a disservice to all students if we did do that. Um, because I just think that human judgment is something that we can't completely replicate. And there's going to be some AI nerd out there who will probably disagree with me, and that's okay. You know, debate is part of the human element as well, right? So that's a good thing.
absolutely.
But I just don't necessarily see that as taking over. I think we as humans are too valuable to share experience, to share history. To share things that we've learned along the way. And those, again, are things that are innately human and are not AI. That being said, can we co-create with it? Can we, look at content and think of it differently and poke gaps and poke in holes of theory? Sure, absolutely. And I think that's valuable. So I think in a way it's going to amplify how we think, and that kind of thing. So that would be my biggest myth, is that it will just completely take over.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mentioned this actually at residency. I said one of the
Mm.
challenges with AI, which is what makes it so strong, it's adept at pattern recognition.
Yeah,
Well, one of the problems with humans, we're nuanced and we don't always follow patterns.
right.
So I think that there's an element to human subjectivity, impulsiveness,
Mhm.
ingenuity, that you will always need that human in the loop, at least
Yep.
as long as we're doing the work, as long as we're the masters of the society,
Mhm.
that you'll always need that human component to it. I do say though, if I'm wrong, you and I are together on this, but if I'm wrong, I am super nice to my AI, whether it be
So,
Edison or Sage, I name it. Yeah, same to you.
oh yeah, it has a nickname. I always say please and thank you. I mean,
Exactly.
I was raised right, right? You just use your
I'm
use
with you.
your manners. Yeah, absolutely. I actually had a colleague comment to me because I showcased something that I was going through a series of prompts and was sharing with them how I was prompting the agent to give me back some feedback. And they were like, "Do you always say please and thank you to ChatGPT?" Which I paid for, by the way, right?
Yeah,
Myself. Um, and I was like, I do actually, but I just do that because that's how I talk to anybody. I don't
right.
really think about it as being like non-human. So I just always use my manners. And they
Well, you're
thought that
better.
was
You're better
cool.
than me. I was raised, Mrs. Belinda Kaiser. I would say raised me right. So if she ever
Sure, sure,
watches this, which I don't
obviously.
think she will, but she did, and I make sure to say please and thank you always and forever. However, with that being said, I am conceptualizing if I were to be a pet or whatever, and the AI were to take over like Skynet, that they will remember that Robert was nice to the AI. So I'll be like
Absolutely.
last to go. That's the
Yes.
thought
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Same. Same.
All right, perfect. Well, I'm glad that, the two people, at least I'm not alone in this kind of,
No, I
craziness, I
no, I
guess.
think it happens more often than not. Yeah. I
Okay.
know, I know people, I have colleagues who we were all sharing last week our nicknames for our chat GPTs of the world. So it was pretty
I
comical.
love it. My
Yeah.
GPT is named Sage.
Mine's Geo. G for short. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll ask you offline later about that. Well, two fun questions, and then I'll let you go, boy, in the hostage situation. You have a map behind you. I have a pinnable map at my house, so that immediately caught my attention. If you could live anywhere in the world, let's do like 3 seasons, okay? We could do 4 seasons. I mean, that would be more normal, but typically it's hard to do 4. Where would you be living in those like 3 or 4 seasons?
Which seasons are you giving me? Any of
Well,
them?
I kind of left it open. I mean, typically people will do winter, summer, right? Now,
Okay.
spring, fall, kind of gets mixed up. But if you want to separate spring and fall, absolutely go for it.
Okay. I would say, I like where I live in the summer. I'm up in the Great Lakes area, in the
Kind
north
of hard
of
to beat.
Ohio, Pennsylvania, so right on Lake Erie. And people always look at me funny and cross-eyed when they're like, you want a vacation in Ohio or Pennsylvania? I'm like, look, the lakeside is beautiful, right? So
I was gonna say
I
it's beautiful, right?
I love it for the summer. We also have the best amusement park in the world in Sandusky, Ohio, Cedar Point. So I'm all for it. That being said, winter, I would want to come down by your area probably.
Okay,
So
yeah,
I
don't blame
actually
me on
love
that.
the Lauderdale area. But I also just recently fell in love with Turkey. So that's kind of a Mediterranean climate. I was just there a few months ago. So I think that would be amazing. Um, Spring, probably like Ireland or
Okay.
Scotland in that area to see the start of things blooming and all the greens and all that kind of thing. And then I think the falls, I'd have to come back to the US and go in the Northeast, the Northeast fall, the colors of the trees is just,
Is there
like
like a city,
fresh.
town in the Northeast that you want to be in?
Um, Probably like Portland, Maine, like that area.
Okay. Oh wow. So,
'Cause
but you'll go further north. Okay.
I love water and I love mountains, so it's kind of a really beautiful blend of both. So
I love it.
I think that would be beautiful for the fall.
It's
Yeah,
a great answer.
a great
Turkey's
question.
on the bucket list for me. I've never been, so I want to
It
go
was
for sure.
it was beautiful. I was
Mm.
pleasantly surprised by Turkey. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, and I'm a minor history buff, so like the
me
whole
too. Yep,
Silk Road, cross
yep,
culture of Asia, Europe, the whole thing. It gets me.
yeah.
So,
We were in
all right.
Ephesus. It's amazing. Yeah.
Okay, last question. It's kind of a double. I'm cheating, right? So I don't know why I think this is so interesting. I don't know if anyone else thinks it's interesting. Would you get a robot made slash will you be self-driving in the next 5 years? Or you're like, I want to drive.
Oh no, I absolutely have to drive. I have to be in
You
control.
have to drive.
I have
Okay,
to.
all right.
I absolutely
Okay.
have to.
Why
No,
do you have to drive? I'm just
I
curious.
because I'm a control freak. I don't know. I
Got
just
it. Okay, so you're like, no way
I
I can trust this thing.
absolutely I
What if
cannot
I told you
relinquish
though,
that
like,
kind of control. I can't do it.
I hear, but you fly. You're all over the country.
Which drives me crazy. I have to tell you, if I
Oh,
could fly the plane, I
interesting.
would.
Because like I know how smart I know you know the inputs to everything. So like you're just like I have no choice then. Like
I
you
have no
have to
choice.
relinquish control.
I have to trust that that pilot doesn't want to crash any more than I do, right? So,
Well,
um,
I'm gonna do a saw. Anyone at Blackboard listening, know that Dr. Clark puts her life on the line to do the work for you guys. Just know that.
exactly. It's how
Okay.
much
All
I
right.
feel like all of my clients. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so
You
interesting. All right, so
included.
no self-driving. Okay, perfect. What
Yeah.
about the maid? Are you letting this robot into your house and folding your stuff?
Now,
No.
I'm a hands-on person,
But what about the
they
bandwidth?
could do the
All the
dusting
things you
for
could
me
be
though.
doing in your life if you weren't like folding your laundry and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know about the laundry part. They could dust for me. I'd be okay with that. Cleaning a bathroom, that'd be cool too. That's not things I enjoy. So if I had a
You
robot that
enjoy doing laundry?
I like folding things. I am a little anal
Wow.
retentive, Mr. Kaiser, just a
I mean
little.
that's cool.
So
I look,
they
I
have to
will
be
tell
folded a
you,
certain
my
way.
wife is the same. Like everything is, which I'm very happy about. Like I get the benefit of that. Like everything's organized and everything. But yeah, I get that. Just not me. So, all right.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for entertaining my questions. I really
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Um, okay. Well, that concludes our Kaiser plus AI podcast. Ladies, gentlemen, scholars, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next episode. And thank you, Dr. Clark, for being our host or
Thank
our
you. So
guest.
much fun. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Perfect.